Hi, this is Mark Laughlin here to do the Ambidextral Gunfighter review of the Walther PPQ or the Walther Pew Pew Q M1 Classic. You may recall from my previous Ambidextral Gunfighter review of the Ruger American Compact 9 that I was not happy with. One, the fact that the ambidextrous slide release was actually just an ambidextrous slide stop, and the trigger behaved differently right-handed and left-handed. I was fortunate in that I was able to take that in and trade it in at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports in Gillette, Wyoming, and it was there that I discovered this jewel, the Walther PPQ M1 Classic. What initially drew me to this pistol was the European style paddle magazine release. Now, European style doesn't necessarily attract me right away. You typically want something that's more American style, but I really like this European style magazine release. It is very ambidextrous. It's identical on both sides. It's very easy to reach, and in fact, if you operate the magazine release in a pinch fashion using the forefinger and the thumb, you can drop the magazine out with great ease, left or right-handed. Another feature of the paddle style magazine release is that when holstered, your holster is going to cover up the trigger guard, and it's going to protect that magazine release and prevent an accidental ejection of your magazine. Now, it's not uncommon for a push-button magazine pistol for the button to hit either against your body or your holster or something, and then dump your magazine. Could be kind of embarrassing. Now, for those Americans who really just can't stand the idea of a European-style magazine, we can hope that if the American gun manufacturers will at least create an ambidextrous push-button magazine release, and ideally it would be such that you could squeeze both sides at the same time, as in this. Now, as you may recall, the Ruger American Compact 9, it was an opposed button, so you pushed one side and the button moved out on the other. The reason I like this type of operation, this pinch operation on the mag release, and that could apply to the push button if you're doing a pinch operation like that, is that it allows you to keep a much better grip on the firearm while doing mag ejections. Eject the mag, you've got a firm grip on the firearm. With the push button, you're often shifting your grip to reach that button. The second feature that really drew me to this pistol was, and it was of course an ambi feature, is the ambidextrous slide release. And it is, by God, an ambidextrous slide release, not an ambidextrous slide stop. And it's perfect in that it is identical on both sides of the pistol, left and right. And it is also a fairly long lever, so you have lots of leverage on it to work the slide release. And though it is a long slide release, it is easy to operate, either left or right-handed. It is quite unobtrusive. In fact, it only sticks out about another tenth of an inch from the rest of the firearm. Another neat feature of the Walther Pew Pew Q is that it weighs 24.5 ounces. Now, in my own measurements, my own scale, I measured it at 25.6 ounces. So I'm showing it to be a little heavier than Walther specs are claiming. Nonetheless, it is a very good rounds to weight ratio. When looking at my rounds per weight spreadsheet and looking at weighted rounds, this pistol is comparable to the SIG P365 at 0.53 weighted rounds per ounce. Now, going by raw numbers, this actually bests the SIG P365 in that it holds 0.61 rounds per ounce, which is very close to the Glock 19. And with this, you get full ambidextrous controls. that weighted rounds per ounce and the actual rounds per ounce puts this in the top 4 of my rounds per size and weight spreadsheet. Spreadsheet, which is available on ambgun.com, ambgun.com, was originally released by TFB TV, another YouTube channel, covers a lot of gun stuff, and I took their spreadsheet, made some tweaks, modified it, and made it my own. And there's some things on there you may or may not agree with. For example, my weighting of rounds may be different than your weighting would. Now, one of the key things that you would expect from German engineers is what you get in the Walther PPK. Besides excellent construction, it's the efficient engineering, the fact that it does score high on the number of rounds per ounce. It would be nice if they could shave a few more ounces off of this and get it just a little bit lighter, a couple ounces lighter, and it'd be besting almost everything in the field except the Kel-Tec P11. Now, the thickness of the slide release is the widest part of this pistol, and it is 1.35 inches. If you ignore the slide release in this in the calculation of the width of this pistol, it is in line with pretty much every other double stack 9 out there. It is about 1.2 inches wide. But that really doesn't tell the whole story about this pistol. One, while yes, this pistol is 1.2 inches wide on its thickest part of its slide, as is the Glock 19, as you notice, this pistol has a rather oval profile in the top part of the pistol. That means, as far as overall volume, this pistol is taking up a little bit less space than the Glock 19. So, and even though the spreadsheet is not reflecting the fact of, this oval feature of this pistol, this reduced volume that it takes up, it still scores very high. And I think if we were to actually do full volume measurement, like immersion in a liquid or a gel or something, to find out exactly how much space this thing is taking up, I think it would best the Glock 19. Another neat feature of the oval top end here is that fits against the body nicely. We, as human beings, and particularly men, tend to prefer curves rather than sharp edges. So curves fit up against us quite nice and quite well. We are still talking about the Pew Pew Q, right? One thing that's kind of a minor gripe, and it probably doesn't apply to most people, is these ridges or these lumps on the grip. Now, one thing I don't like about it is that it makes overall the grip about almost 1/10 of an inch wider. And I like narrow and flat, better concealment. But the other thing is that with my fingers, and for most people with larger fingers, these lumps will be just fine. But for mine, when I try to suck my the web of my thumb right up into the back of the pistol, and I get a good grip there, these lumps are fighting me, and as I fire the pistol, my hand tends to shift down to where I'm in between those lumps better. And then I end up with about 1/4 of an inch gap, or not almost 1/4 of an inch gap, at the web of my thumb behind the back strap of the pistol. And what we want, of course, is we want that firm, tight grip high in the pistol to get that bore axis as close as we can over the hand. I've seen a lot of YouTube reviewers raving about the Walther Pew Pew Q's wonderful trigger. And this is one area in which I kind of disagree. I find that there's actually quite a bit of creep as you take up the slack in the trigger, and then once you reach that wall, there's even some creep after that before it actually breaks. There's click, creep, 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 and then finally the nice clean break. Now, for me, this is not that important. As we discussed in our earlier videos, I am more concerned about convulsive grip as far as firing the weapon. In a high-intensity fear, life-threatening situation, convulsive grip is what you're going to have. You're going to lose that fine motor control, so convulsive grip firing of the weapon is the way to go. This is per Rex Applegate. So, I really am not while I really don't care too much about the fact that the trigger is not as great as everybody seems to think it is, because I don't really care. But still, it would be nice for those when you get to that, beyond, let's say, 25 feet or 30 feet, and you are using the sights and you are using precise motor control to fire the shot. It would be nice to have a little bit better trigger. Now, Walther has promised to send me a part, and I'm not sure what it is, somewhere under the slide, that will improve the quality of the trigger. Now, if you pull the slide off of this pistol, we can look underneath and we can see that once the slide is off, the trigger is actually, a lot of the creep goes away and it's a much better trigger. So I think one of these pieces here, as you pull the trigger, is dragging against the slide. Now, my opinion is probably, if I shoot this thing a hell of a lot, it's probably going to just smooth out on its own and I won't even need to stick that new part in. We'll see. The trigger guard is provides a lot of room for gloved operation of this weapon. You can get a big finger with a glove on here inside the trigger guard to operate the weapon. Now what that means is that the trigger guard extends fairly far out compared to some of the other pistols I own. I can just barely get the tip of my finger out onto the edge of the trigger guard to index for safe presentation of the pistol. Now, some would say, well, you can move your trigger finger up higher towards the slide on the side of the frame of the pistol. I don't like doing that because for point shooting, we want this locked wrist, indexed trigger finger pointing at what we're going to shoot at and locked elbow for point shooting. So it's a very minor issue, but just something I wanted to mention. It does provide, like a Glock with that squared off front trigger guard, a great place to rest a hand for the two-handed hold. One feature I really like about this pistol is the grip angle. It is practically perfect for point shooting. Lock your wrist, lock your elbow, get that index finger out and point at your target, and it's going to be almost right on. The Pew Pew Q that I have in my hand here has the plastic sights, and they're quite robust plastic sights. It's not lightweight plastic by any means. These also have an adjustment for windage on the rear sight. Now, as I understand, the sights, the Pew Pew Q is available with steel sights, illuminated steel sights. So that is an option for you. For me, again, it's not a big deal because most of the time I'm not even using the sights. I'm using point shooting. You also notice the rear sight has a nice shelf there. So if you're Mr. Operator and you want to rack your slide with your belt, it's good to go. Now the slide has this wonderful coating on it. They call it their Tenifer coating, and it's allegedly good for protecting the firearm from rust and corrosion. But what I really like about what Walther has done is their coating is very matte, is very non-reflective. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, that makes the pistol not shine light out and say, hey, I'm concealed carrying a pistol, because there's not this shiny piece of metal reflecting light out from under your shirt. The other is as you're shooting in self-defense, there is no glare off the pistol reflecting light into your eyes and interfering with your ability to see the target, see the threat, or to switch to your sights to make an accurate shot. Now, one small downside with the matte Tenifer finish, and like I said, I like it because it's non-reflective. To me, this is way more important than I'm going to talk about here. But one little thing is that it can show marks almost like a chalkboard, whereas a slicker finish would not show marks quite as bad. But still, I prefer the matte finish. Also, to help with dispersing light, is the Walther has created these little tiny, almost micro grooves on the top of the slide, which also help to disperse light. I think that given the quality of their matte Tenifer finish, they could probably eliminate that and just rely on the Tenifer matte finish to prevent the reflection of light. And that might save a gram or two of weight. But hey, it's a gram or two of weight they could save on this pistol. And we want to work towards getting this thing down. Maybe another ounce or ounce and a half would be pretty nice. When I was at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports in Gillette, Wyoming, looking to trade in my Ruger, and I was, of course, looking at this pistol, there were two other candidates I also considered. And one was the CZ P10C. And I got to admit, I really liked the CZ P10C. It had, I think, a better trigger than what this came with. Now, I think this is going to smooth out, and maybe the parts from Walther will make it work better as well. But the CZ P10 had a conventional push-button magazine release, was ambidextrous, and it had a nice ambidextrous slide release. The slide release was very Glock-like, which meant it was a much smaller slide release, which is good some ways. It was unobtrusive, but you did not get the leverage on it. It took a little more oomph to get that slide to drop with that little tiny button. Whereas with the Walther PPQ, as you see, you've got a lot of leverage here to drop that slide. But I did like the grip on the CZ P10C. It did not have the lumps in it, and it seemed a little bit narrower, and the pistol felt lighter to me, even though according to manufacturer specs, this is the lighter pistol. But maybe my scale is right, and this is a little heavier than what Walther specs are showing. Maybe there's been some changes they've made that add a little bit of weight to this. The other pistol I looked at was the H&K VP9. And what I really liked about it, what attracted to me right off the bat was it was available in other colors besides black. Now, it's not that I'm just looking to be fashionable. I have a reason for not being too fond of black. Black absorbs sunlight, and that means if you leave your pistol out in the sun, it's going to get hot. Now, for pistols, this isn't as big a deal, unlike rifles and carbines. I insist on my rifles and carbines being a color other than black, something lighter, something that will reflect light a bit. Flat dark earth is good, a gray or a camo pattern is fine too, or even a winter camo pattern. It's got a little bit of white in it to really get rid of that light and keep your weapon cool. Now, for pistols, it's not as critical because it's typically holstered and protected from excess exposure to the light. But it did look cool, so maybe it was a fashion thing. It was an H&K VP9, and I think if I remember right, it was in gray, and it looked pretty sweet. And what I liked right off the bat was it had the European style paddle release, and it felt very similar to the Pew Pew Q. And so I was like, okay, maybe the H&K was a little more money, but maybe the H&K VP9. But then I went and looked at the slide releases, and though it did have ambidextrous slide releases, they were not perfectly mirrored. It was small on one side and very big on the other side, or larger on the other side. And the feel was quite different. And as we've discussed in the earlier videos in this series, perfect mirroring and perfect feel is important. Like I've mentioned many a time, you don't want your trigger to be 5 pounds and crisp right-handed and then switch left-handed and it's 15 pounds and a lot of creep. That is not what you want. You want consistent from left to right. Your brain will learn quickly to transfer the training of the right hand to the left hand. It kind of almost like it does this copy-paste function from right to left. Once your brain figures out what you're trying to do as you're trying to become an ambidextral gunfighter. The CZ P10C, it is about $150, I think cheaper than the Pew Pew Q. And it's going to vary, of course, depending on manufacturer's suggested retail price and what you can find it in the discount markets. In sum, the CZ P10C was a very Glock-like pistol, but it did have the slide releases were very Glock-like. The takedown buttons were also very much like the Glock. It looks like they just copied it right off the Glock perfectly. The takedown on the PPQ is also similar to the Glock, but it's not the little recess buttons that I found a little bit hard to kind of get a hold of and push down. But anyway, it's not either way, it's the CZ-P10. If you're looking for an ambidextrous pistol that is very Glock-like, that may be the way you want to go. But if you really want to push the envelope a bit and experiment with this European-style paddle magazine release, I think if you take the time, you're going to really like it. Okay, in sum, what would I do if I were starting all over? Is this the gun I would go with? For an ambidextrous combat size pistol, a 9mm and 15 round capacity, definitely. This is definitely the one I would go with. I like it. The slide releases are awesome. The paddle magazine release is terrific. The feel is pretty good. I might grind off these lumps and then I'll be extra happy with it. The design, the oval shape of it, at first did not appeal to me. But as I become to work with it and come to appreciate why it's oval, one, it's saving a little bit of weight, it's less blocky, less material. Shaved off some of that material to make it kind of oval shape. And it's also, the curves are gentler against the man's body. So yeah, this pistol has really grown on me. And the trigger seems to be getting a little bit better. It's wearing in. And if that part comes in from Walther, I may put that in and see if it improves further. Like I said, I don't really care. But however, this is, of course, my favorite combat pistol, but it is not my daily carry. My daily carry is still the Kel-Tec PF9. Unfortunately, it's not ambidextrous, and here I am, Mr. Ambidextral Gunfighter, and I don't carry my ambidextrous pistol. I carry a Kel-Tec PF9. Now, why is it? Size and weight, simple as that. The thing weighs 12.7 ounces. It's almost half the weight of this. Now, yeah, it only carries half the rounds, but that's good enough for me. Hey, I'm just a civilian. I live in a pretty safe state. I'm not in a major city where there's lots of crime. So 7 rounds is going to be plenty. And if I'm out in the wilderness, I may throw in an extra mag and carry a total of 14 rounds, and with plus 1 in the chamber, so I got 15. Now, of course, the Kel-Tec is not as elegant as the Pew Pew Q or Glock or really maybe any other pistol except maybe the High Point. But it's a thoroughbred. It's lightweight, 12.7 ounces. It's very thin, conceals very well. And then when it's too big, I'll typically go to the Ruger LCP. Now, of course, here I was railing on the failure of the Ruger American Compact 9 as an ambidextral pistol, but I got to give credit to Ruger. The LCP, I love it. A great little tiny, lightweight, compact pocket pistol. Can't hardly beat it. So for my hierarchy of needs, the LCP is my pocket pistol. The PF9 will be maybe a inside the waistband carry, and then my Pew Pew Q is in what I will carry typically in my Hill People Gear runner's kit chest bag, and like for in bear country, so I can carry a 9mm with 15 rounds and throw in an extra magazine, so I've got 30 rounds, and hopefully can deal with a bear or a mountain lion with 30 rounds. Now, what I would love to see is Walther take on the Kel-Tec PF9. Take this overall design, slim it down with a single stack, or maybe like that modified quasi semi-double stack of the SIG P365, and get say 7 to 10 rounds in something very thin, narrow, and then reduce the weight to 18 ounces. That'd be nice. 17, 18 ounces, and then keep it ambidextrous. I'll be all over that pistol. That would probably replace my Kel-Tec PF9. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I've been carrying the Kel-Tec PF9 for almost 3 decades now. It's just small, compact. I've never had to use it and probably never will. It's good enough. So, in sum, Walther Pew Pew Q M1 Classic. In my opinion, the best ambidextral gunfighter pistol on the planet. It does everything a Glock can do, accuracy and reliability. Its rounds per ounce is comparable to the Glock or the Block 19. It has wonderful ambidextrous slide releases. It has the terrific pinch operation ambidextrous paddle magazine, European style paddle magazine. It has nice curves that appeal to the man's body, and it holds 15 rounds, just like the Glock 19. Hard to beat. I suggest you take a look at it. I know there for a while, Walther was offering a deal where you could try one for 30 days, and if you didn't like it, send it back and get your money back. Now, I think that is going to expire shortly. So, but anyway, that speaks to their confidence and how well you'll like it, and hopefully, my opinion maybe gives you some confidence that you're going to like it as well. This is the Ambidextral Gunfighter review of the Walther Pew Pew Q. I hope you've enjoyed my Ambidextral Gunfighter review of the Walther Pew Pew Q M1 Classic. And okay, this is now my #1 ambidextral pistol. Coming shortly, we're going to be looking at what is my #1 ambidextral rifle. And if you pay attention, there may be a hint here somewhere.